Was there a light switch moment for you in high school or even before that was the defining moment as far as joining the Navy and in particular becoming a SEAL?
I didn't think that, you know, I was capable to be part of an organization that was held in that high of a regard. Straight to BUBS class 278. After SQT, I went to SEAL Team 8. We shifted locations and we went to North Africa. That embassy had gotten hammered, dude. We spent a couple of months there doing good work.
Where did the running bug come from?
In the military, I guarantee you, you're being challenged physically and mentally. I realized that I was going to need something else in my life that challenged me in that way. There's a certain type of race that happens within the ultra running community, and it's called a last man standing race. You have about 100 people show up and the whistle goes off. You run until only one person's left.
Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He spent 12 years as a U.S. Navy SEAL. He's a co-founder of the 3 of 7 Project, which is an organization that helps people master their body, soul, and spirit to become a complete human being. He's an entrepreneur. He's an ultra runner. He does make Forrest Gump look like Lieutenant Dan, and his beard has its own weather system. Ladies and gents, welcome to the stage, Chad Wright.
Mike, thank you so much for having me, brother. You know, I have been a fan of the Mic Drop podcast.
Is that right?
For quite a while.
Sure.
Yes, you didn't even know it.
I didn't.
But I've been listening to you for a long time, man.
That's flattering.
You have just a very smooth and calming voice. You really ask great questions. You get right down to the hard topics. And I'm really honored to be here, dude. Well, I never thought I would have a seat at the Mic Drop podcast.
Oh, shit. Well, that's, I mean, that's humbling as hell to hear you say that. As far as the voice thing, I do read audiobooks for Penthouse Letters, so that is part of. No, I don't. I had you going. No, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for the kind words. It's an honor to have you here. I've been following your path for a couple of years now as well, and have marveled at what you have going on. So the feeling is absolutely mutual. I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
You might not know it, but I was also a dog man for a long time.
Is that right?
Myself, yes.
Before the Navy? Or
well, before, and actually a little time while I was active duty. When I grew up, and I know this isn't on your questionnaire there.
I bet it is.
When I grew up, I actually grew up doing something that a lot of your listeners probably won't understand. It's called raccoon hunting.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll bet more of them do than you'd think.
Okay. Well, you know, it's a dying sport. Yeah. And I was a dog man. You know, we had coon hounds ever since I was young, and it's a lot of work to raise and train good quality dogs. Yeah. And that's another thing that gives me a great appreciation for who you are, because I know the amount of talent that takes. Yeah. You're training a different style of dog than we trained, but nonetheless, training that dog, a lot of things probably cross over.
Yeah, I would say more things than not, honestly. I mean, one of the unique and kind of interesting things I think about dog training across the board is there's not a huge difference between basic obedience, hunting, military work, obedience, agility, you name it. I mean, to me, the process from A to B is very, very similar, irrespective of what A and B are. You know, the principles that you're using in terms of consistency and nonverbal communication, body language, and reinforcement, and consequences for certain undesirable behaviors, and just being super consistent and predictable to the dog so that they know what to expect. That's all the exact same, no matter what you're teaching them to do, you know. And similarly, even with breeding, you know, being hyper selective in terms of the traits that you're trying to acquire in a breeding program, the way that you select them are no different. For that matter, it's not even species specific. I mean, if you're talking laying hens or dairy cattle or any breeding programs, even in zoos where they're trying to maintain a certain character trait set, you know, it's all the exact same. You know, genetics are genetics, and how you select for them is largely the same, kind of irrespective of it. But that's really neat. I'll definitely get into the coonhound stuff, because that I'm fascinated by it. I mean, I did some hunting for a number of years with a few different breeds of dogs for hog hunting and stuff. So I have a serious appreciation for that. No two ways about it. And I learned a lot from a conditioning and nutrition and breeding theory, and even from a veterinary standpoint, because those dogs get hurt quite a bit more than police and military dogs. So a lot of what I know and have applied, even within, you know, police and military realms, a lot of it is driven from bird dog hunting as a kid, and then hog dog hunting in my kind of early adult years.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's remarkable.
And you mentioned that breeding as an aspect of being a dog man or a dog handler. Breeding is something that I don't think people can really appreciate. So the guy that I was mentored by when I was young in the dog business, he was a breeder.
Yeah.
That was his gift. He could look at a hound and he could pick out traits that other people just would not see. I mean, everything from the way the dog's feet contacted the ground to its back to its, it amazed me. And he was able, it took him about 2 decades to actually breed one of the best lines of coonhound in the nation. But that is a real skill in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Within the whole dog breeding and dog business, handling and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a huge appreciation for the breeding that goes into creating a dog that is meant to do a specific job.
Yeah, absolutely. And at a high level, no matter what discipline you're talking about, you know, whether it's any type of hunting or, again, police, military work, or even, you know, search and rescue, I mean, you name it, to get it at that level where the dogs have both the genetics to do the work, and then somebody that has the competency training wise to get them to that level. I mean, you have to have both. People talk about nature versus nurture, and it's not an either or. It's you have to have both of them at a high level to operate in that realm. But from the breeding standpoint, like, that shit doesn't happen by accident.
No,
you know? I mean,
that's years and years, man.
Yeah, decades of funneling genes with people who are brilliantly talented at both having an eye for a dog. And then the other part that I think a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it is the reality of maintaining genetic lines, is being non-kennel blind and honest with yourself on what you're producing.
Yeah.
Most people, just like with their own kids, like, oh, it's the next fucking Brett Favre. No, it isn't. He sucks. You know, like, just level with yourself.
Yep.
I mean, you can watch auditions at American Idol to see how woefully inadequate human beings are at evaluating their own offspring. You know, so but it's the same way with dogs. You know,
have to cull heavily.
You have to.
You have to cull heavily.
Yeah, and that doesn't. You know, most people hear that word and they think, you know, that it means that you're taking the life of every dog that doesn't make it, and that's not necessarily the case. Yes, there are some programs that do that, but there are a lot that don't. You know, for me, myself, you know, if puppies don't make the cut, they get either spay or neutered and given away to, you know, farms down the street that want, you know, a companion, or friends of mine that just want an active companion or what have you.
Yep.
You know, so there is a right way to do it, but the key point is that you have to, the culling, to me, where kind of the spirit of that word needs to be applied, is that you're removing those genes from the gene pool.
Exactly.
You know, however you're doing it, is that those aren't being entered into progeny generations down the pedigree, and that's where most people, I think, fail miserably. Is they mistake personality and relationship attachment that they have with an animal for quality.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a marked difference, you know. So, but anyway, this isn't a dog podcast, I promise.
You're a professional, man. But I like hearing you talk about this. Is a testament to how much of a professional you are.
Oh, well,
so
I appreciate it. We'll definitely get into it as well. I do want to cover some of the stuff that you've been doing, and I'm sure we'll.
Yeah, don't let me derail you, Mike. I could talk dogs all day, brother.
You and me both. Maybe that's a bad combination. Do you have a most memorable running experience that stands out above all others? I'm sure they all are in their own way, but is there one that stands out as being kind of the apex of your career running
experience? Yeah. I have many, but I guess most memorable was probably the last race that I ran. There's a certain type of race that happens within the ultra running community, and it's called a last man standing race. That's the format, right? So you have a bunch of ultra runners show up, and there's a loop. And in this particular race, it's a 1 mile loop with 350 something feet of elevation gain and loss per mile. That adds up quick, right? You have about 100 people show up, and the whistle goes off, and you essentially, without going into intense detail, you run until only one person's left. That race, the particular race I'm talking about, is called the Mid-State Mile. And the first year they did it was in 2020. 2020, when coronavirus hit, ultra running is a pretty hippie sport.
Yeah.
And, the hippies were all about coronavirus and shutting everything down. So all the daggone races canceled. Well, the people who put on Mid-State Mile, good friends of mine, they're rednecks just like me. And they said, we're putting on a freaking race, man, so people can have a chance to get out of their house and come out here and run and do what they love to do. And I showed up in 2020, and I won in 2020. I ran 30 hours straight against a very worthy competitor. Got down to me and one other guy. The other guy's name's Greg Armstrong. He runs for the American National Ultra Running Team, and it was an epic battle to the finish. There's a video of Greg collapsing as he comes across the finish line because his mind is stronger than his body, and so his body's shutting down and he's collapsing, and it was just unbelievable. And I went back in 2021 and won the race again, and that's as of now pretty much the apex of my running career. In 2021 at that race, I ran for 38 hours straight, 122 miles, and with the elevation gain and loss per mile, I accumulated 37,700 feet of climbing and the same in descent. So Mount Everest, for reference, is about 29,029 feet. Yeah. So we were, way over that. And, it was awesome, man. I mean, it was an epic battle, and to pull that off two years in a row, that felt good. But there's also a little bit of pain attached to that because, a last man standing race in the Mid-State Mile in particular, you can only run as far as the other person there, that the other best person there is going to take you. Because once everybody quits, you have to stop running. And at 38 hours, I was all systems go. I felt like I could run another 38 hours. Yeah. Now, that might not be true. You never know when you're pushing that deep into the human capability. Something's eventually going to break in the body and take you out. Yeah. But it was an epic battle, but I left there hungry, man, because I felt like I could have went a lot further, and I had to stop running. But that's probably the pinnacle, probably the most difficult ultra running endeavor that I have encountered, and tons of lessons came out of that, man.
Yeah. Is there if you had to guess, I know it is a guess, but how much farther do you think you had in you? I felt at the end of that race like I could have ran infinitely. Really? And again, that's not true, but that's what I was telling myself about myself. And it's Mike, in the teams, we do something called a function check on our weapon before we go out and do whatever we need to do. And we go through that weapon systems. We make sure everything is functioning properly. And I do that on my body when I'm out running. Every 15, 20 minutes, I'll do a function check.
I'll go from the bottom of my feet all the way, work my way up through every aspect of my body, and mental check all the way to the top of my head. And all systems were go. The function check was good. And I don't know how much further I could have went. I wish I would have found it.
Yeah. Was there a disparity between the first year and second year time-wise that you ran, or was it pretty similar?
First year was 30 hours. Okay. Second year was 38 hours. Wow. I would have liked to have went 48 hours just to say I ran for 2 days. Yeah. I was kind of disappointed in that.
I have to know, where is your mind at during 38 hours of running? Is it almost like a single point of meditation where you're laser focused on a singular thing, or is it all over the place? Is it somewhere in between? Can you walk us through the inside of your head during that time?
Yeah. So I try to keep my mind simply right here where my feet are. Now, the human mind is a hard thing to master. It's human nature to want to think ahead. So I'm constantly aware of where my mind is, and at intervals, and especially when it gets really difficult, because you go through low points. You run that long, you're going to hit low points, and I'll catch myself. I'm self-aware enough to know where, even if my mind starts to drift 10 minutes ahead, and maybe I'm thinking, okay, when I come off of this loop, I'm going to do a shoe change. And I start thinking about how good it's going to feel to do a shoe change. I will tell myself out loud, Chad, stay present. Like you can't think about that, man. You have to think about the very next step that you're going to take here on this trail. And that's for really 2 reasons. It's because if you overextend yourself mentally, it's going to crush you. It's just more than you can handle when you're doing something extremely difficult, and especially you don't know when the end is. BUDS is very similar to that. I believe the number 1 reason people quit BUDS is because they overextend themselves mentally, and same in ultra running. So it's just it's key, man.
What is there a most distracted you've been? Like, what's the in both of those races? Where did your mind go the furthest from where it should have been, and what were you thinking about? Is anything?
So yeah, that's actually a really great question, dude. That's why I love this podcast. You ask questions that nobody else ever asks.
I'm a dork, and I'm curious.
Yeah. When my mind gets furthest from, in that particular race in 2021, when it got furthest from where it should have been, is when it got down to just me and one other competitor. Everyone else had quit. And it was just me and this one other guy for a long, long time, just going head to head, loop after loop after loop. And when I started to see a little weakness in him, when I started to see little chinks in his armor, and you know, his emotions start to flare up, he started belching and farting and, you know, slamming cokes, just trying to stay alive and get another loop. I knew the end was near, but I was still in the fight. Like I hadn't won yet. Yeah. But I knew the end was near for him. And so when that happens, it's really, really difficult not to start counting your eggs or your chickens before they hatch, right? It's really, really hard to stay there and say, I got to stay locked in, man. You know, the similar thing happened in 2020 when I was running against Greg, and me and Greg had battled it out. Last 2 guys in 2020, we battled it out for hours, and Greg came across the finish line and collapsed. You just don't see people push themselves that far in normal life. And when you witness another human pushing themselves to that level, it can be really, really emotional.
Sure.
So a similar thing happened. When I saw that happen, I knew the end was near. This was probably going to be the last loop. And when I saw Greg collapse, I tried to talk to him, but I almost started crying. I could feel the emotion welling up in my throat. And I immediately had to remember part of our creed that says my ability to control my emotions and my actions regardless of circumstances is what sets me apart. And I had to say, I can't overextend myself emotionally here. This is something to behold, this man pushing himself to this limit. But I'm still in the fight because this dude may bounce back. And if I allow these emotions to well up and I begin to tear up and cry from witnessing this, it's going to steal energy from me that I might potentially need because he might come back from the dead. And so there at the very end, I think that's pretty common across the board. When you can see the finish line,
yeah,
that's when you end up getting hurt or screwing something up.
Well, you see it in a lot of professional sports where, especially football, like guys think they've scored and they trip, or, they start celebrating 10 yards out, whatever. It's like, it's the classic example of that, I think, that most people can relate to.
Yeah.
From a rule standpoint wise, what are you allowed or not allowed to do in that regard with a competitor if they fall? Like if you stop and try to help them up, do you now technically quit also because you stopped running, or how does that work?
Yes. So the way the race works is that 1 mile loop, you go out on the loop and you have 20 minutes. And so usually I would come in off of that loop within about 17 minutes, which would give me 3 minutes to fill my water bottle up and shove some food in my mouth. If you are not back in the starting corral before the 20-minute whistle, for the next whistle, for the next loop, you're out of the race. Okay. So it's a brutal cutoff, and they really adhere to that. If you're not standing in the start line, starting corral, you're dropped from the race.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Man, that's such an interesting niche within our society that is pretty rare. I'm assuming you're familiar with the Leadville 100. Have you run that, or? I
haven't ran Leadville. I really enjoy the ultra running culture on the East Coast. I haven't done a lot of West Coast races. East Coast ultra runners are real gritty, nasty, beer drinking, great people, salt of the earth. I'm not putting them down, you know what I mean? And West Coast ultra running is a different culture. It's a little more high performance. It's a little dry for me. I like culture, man. Yeah. And so that's where I do most of my racing. And the last man standing format is the perfect format for me because I have never, ever in my whole life, including to this day, been the fastest, the strongest, or the smartest. I never, ever have I been either of those three things amongst a group of humans. But let me tell you, if it comes down to I just have to keep moving, just pure grit, I'm probably going to outlast you. Yeah. And that, if I can lean into that, I call it grit. If I have an arena where I can lean into that purely, I can really wreck some people, dude. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it. Would you be open to doing a you versus Goggins Navy SEAL Foundation charity fundraiser type of thing?
I've actually mentioned that, man. I think that, that's one thing that I think is lacking amongst our brotherhood here on the outside. Man, we don't come together enough. And if we could put something like that together, where you took a bunch of guys out here that are influential, and we did a head-to-head, last man standing,
that would be awesome,
type of race, we could, I think, raise millions of dollars to help families and to help guys that need to get help, which there are many. Yeah, there are many. Yeah, I think that would be absolutely amazing. We'd have to do it for the right reasons, and I think that's the right reason to do it.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's, I know we both know a few people. I think, after this, we'll see if we can work something out, or at least shake some trees and see if we can get it going.
That'd be a blast, man.
What are the two key components for canine success? That's effective training and proper nutrition. Fueled by Team Dog brings those two components to your family and best friend. The perfect nutritional balance that results in a higher mental acuity, energy, overall vitality, and even an improved appearance. Every product you will find in my company's store was born from the battlefield and not from the boardroom. Let my life's work help you become your dog's hero. We'll definitely get back into into some more running stuff. It's supposed to be the lightning round, but if it gets off track in a good way, I always let it. Why are we here as human beings? What is your take on that?
Wow, that's a deep question. Why are we here as human beings? I can tell you why I'm here as a human being, to serve the creator of the universe, and that is Jesus Christ. That's what drives me to do everything that I do. Yeah. That's the foundational element of every aspect of what I do in business, what I do in life, period.
Is that something that it would be safe to say that you grew up with, or is it something that you grew into? I
actually found out or gained an understanding of who Christ was in 2012. Obviously, growing up in the South, you had heard the gospel of Jesus, but it never really meant much to me until 2012.
Do you mind sharing what that moment was that led you to that?
Yeah, totally. No, I don't mind at all. And by the way, listeners, I'm not a churchy guy or anything like this. This is just, I'm so passionate about this because it changed the trajectory of my entire life and who I am. When people say you're born again, that's literally, it sounds so corny, but that's what it was to me. It was the death of the old man and the rebirth of something totally different. Mm-hmm. And so I was on deployment in 2012, and we were staying in a kind of like a barracks or a building. And just to cut to the chase, I believe it was inhabited by some sort of demon, and weird stuff started happening. And the initial thing I can remember was laying in my bed one night, and something hit my door, jolted me awake, and then I could hear voices up and down, echoing kind of up and down the hallway, and there was a lot of fear attached to that moment. It freaked me out. I got up. Obviously, it was just me and a couple of the guys staying in there. I got up, looked around, nobody was there, walked over to my buddy's room. They were passed out asleep. I thought, man, that was odd. And things like that continued to happen, along with this really, really heavy feeling of oppression, fear and oppression. And I didn't know what to do about it. So it went on for a few weeks, and literally just like sleepless nights, and it wasn't just me experiencing it. And I called my little brother back stateside, and he said, let me put you in touch with my friend. And his friend called me, and he said, hey, man, just put me on speakerphone. Let me walk around this place. And I was just at a loss of how to combat this thing. We understand warfare, but very rarely do you encounter some sort of enemy, if you want to call it that you don't know how to kill it.
Where were you at on deployment? Like what?
It was in Europe.
In Europe.
Yeah. Okay. And when I called him, put him on this speakerphone, he walks around this place and he's praying, which was weird to me. I'd never seen anything like this happen before. And praying in the name of Jesus. And when we got done, I hung up the phone and thought, well, is what it is. And shortly thereafter, realized total peace had returned to this place. So I saw an example of this strange warfare take place in this spiritual realm. And I don't know, it was the first time that I was like, okay, there is some power here. There's obviously some authority that's attached to the name of this person, Jesus Christ. And so I got my hands on a Bible, and I read the first sentence of the Bible, and it made sense to me. You know, in the first sentence of the Bible, it accounts for the three components that create the universe. In the beginning, there's time. God created the heavens, there's space, and the earth, there's matter. Everything that we see is composed of time, space, and matter. And I went on to study the life of Jesus Christ and who he said he is, and consider the evidence that point to the fact that he was telling the truth. I mean, real evidence. Telling the truth about who he said he was. And that he actually was crucified. And he actually rose from the dead. Now, if you come to the conclusion that somebody 2,022 years ago, which, by the way, we count time off of the birth of this man, which is another really strange thing. But if you come to the conclusion that 2,000 years ago, a Jewish man said he was God, and he was crucified, and he rose from the dead, you got to do something with that, man. And you know, not everybody comes to that conclusion, but I believe there's a lot of evidence that can point you to that as the actual truth. Yeah. And then as I've continued to just dig into my understanding of Scripture in the Bible, it's enhanced my life greatly. It's reflected so many things about myself to myself. It's like a mirror. It's the best. It's an unbelievable book. I've studied the book now for the Bible, that is, for over a decade, and it still continues to show me things about myself that I would have never known without it. And it's just the most important thing in my life, man. Do
you have a recollection of what the gentleman on the phone said? Do you remember, like, word for word what he said?
I don't remember word for word. He was essentially, and I learned a lesson. You know, when we talk about prayer, there are two ways I believe we can speak into the spiritual realm, and one is we are praying to Jesus, right? And whether that is thanking him or praising him or requesting from him something that we need to move forward in service of him. And the other way is we actually have the authority to speak against spiritual hosts of wickedness. We have the authority to do that. And essentially that's what he was doing. He was using the authority that he knew he possessed to speak out against this spiritual force of evil or wickedness, whatever it was. So it's a different type of prayer that he was using. Yeah. And you know, I still do the same thing to this day when you know, plenty of times in life I feel like, you know, things are speaking lies into my head, and you feel like something is attacking you. You feel this burden, and man, I'll speak out against it, because it's interesting, because the Bible says that when you accept Christ, he actually comes and lives in you. And it's really hard to understand that the Holy Spirit of Christ inhabits you, your body, right? And, you know, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to Christ. Scripture tells us that. And so by the very fact that he is inhabiting you, that authority that has been given to him in turn can be utilized by you in everyday life. Yeah.
Do you have a opinion, position, perspective on the religions throughout the world and how they fit into what you believe, whether it's contrasting it or, like, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I was actually asked this question yesterday, and
we'll skip it then.
The response is the truth. It's the truth that is in the Holy Bible. Like, I believe the Bible is essentially a blueprint for how we should live our personal lives, how we should conduct ourselves in business, how we should conduct ourselves in marriage, how we should conduct ourselves as a society. It is a blueprint. And you can't dispute the fact that the principles therein work, right? They actually work. And you have probably been to some Muslim countries, maybe some Hindu or Buddhist countries. You've been to other nations, and that the principles that they adhere to, the book that they're reading from, the things that their religion tells them about how they should live their lives and conduct themselves. I want you to look around you next time you're in one of those places and ask yourself, how's that working out for them? So I think the very fact that Scripture really tangibly, there's evidence that it works, that to me makes me cling to Christianity as truth opposed to other religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. I mean, and to be honest with you, I have an opinion that the Muslim religion is essentially Satan's spin on Christianity. You know, if some of you guys probably don't even believe in God, or if you don't believe in God, you can't believe in Satan, but I believe in evil. I believe Satan is a real tangible force that is in play in this reality. And Satan's favorite thing to do, if you just look throughout history, is to take the precepts of Scripture and just mar them, just twist them. So they look similar, but they're twisted in a way that they actually destroy the partaker thereof. It's a great question, man.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I wonder, you know, again, I grew up pretty staunch Lutheran in the Midwest, which is fairly common there, but spent a fair bit of time, you know, studying and learning and you know, being a student of Christianity in that regard, I would say. And I will say that my perspective shifted a fair bit in going overseas in a number of ways, which I don't want to hijack the entire episode or make it about, you know, my beliefs.
I've heard you talk about
more
them.
About you, but
yeah.
But I guess, you know, the one thing that it makes me think of is that there are pockets or parts of the world where you know, that there's just no exposure to Christianity whatsoever. Mm-hmm. You know, and maybe this individual's life is cut short for whatever reason, whether it's disease or just that they live in such a remote part where there is no message that they ever come across that has anything to do with the Word of God. I am curious, you know, from kind of a 30,000 foot view, from God's perspective. Do you have a take on that?
Yes, I do. And Mike, look at take the Native American population, for example. You know, there are pockets still within the world today, but throughout human history, there have been multiple massive populations of human beings that were created in the likeness and image of God, that never heard of Jesus Christ or the God of the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens to those people, right? Like, I believe Scripture addresses that, and it's recorded in, I want to say, the book of Romans. Paul talks about this specifically, and he talks about how those populations, those people who are never exposed to the gospel of Christ, how the law of God is actually written on the human heart in the form of conscience, and that also nature itself is evidence of God, a creator, to those people, right? Mm-hmm. So they have the evidence and the conclusions that they should draw from the nature that they are surrounded by, and they also have the law of God written on their heart in the form of conscience. Now, you know, there are many things, you know, we can have different forms of morality and things like this, but that law of God that I'm talking about in the form of conscience is essentially, do unto others as you would have do unto you, right? Love your neighbor, right? Every human being, I believe, knows that unless they've been corrupted, it's not right to harm another human being. And so I have to imagine, as Paul addressed that in Scripture, I have to imagine that those humans, which are God's children, created in the likeness and image of God, that never had the opportunity to receive Christ, when they do pass from this world unto their eternal home, I do have to believe that they will be judged based off of their adherence to the law of God that was written on their heart. Yeah. Now that's me trying to put logic and also bring the very little bit of Scripture that we have that addresses that question and trying to come up with a conclusion. Yeah. And that's the best conclusion that I can come up with in my own mind. Sure. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah, it does. I guess, again, and I know it's maybe sacrilege in some circles for me to even try to put myself in God's shoes. But as a parent, I know how I feel about my kids, right? And to me, that's the only relationship that I can even try to parallel to, God and the rest of us is that, if he's our heavenly Father, is that we're his children. And again, as a father, is that I think of, what I would give my kids the autonomy to decide on their own, and those things that I wouldn't. And there's a pretty stark contrast between how I think I would help my kids navigate their life and what I would let them just, from a free will standpoint, just let them do and see how it goes versus what it seems like God does with us in this instance. And so that's that is the hardest part that I have with Christianity and just religion as a whole, I would say, is that there are some pretty terrible things that human beings do to each other, and I do understand the thought process behind Satan and the role that he plays and what have you as it relates to Christianity. To me, in thinking of it, like if I have the benevolent power to do the things that God does, there's certain things that I don't think I would let happen. If I saw one of my kids with a 2x4 with nails sticking out of it, getting ready to smack the shit out of the other one, I'm going to stop that from happening. I'm just not going to let them do it, And so to me, maybe that's an oversimplification. Maybe it's all a test to see who passes it. But, to me, even that in some ways with how far human beings take it against one another, it kind of makes me think of a sick, twisted fucking joke to allow things like that to happen. But it also just makes me question why, which I know is common or normal or what have you. But so anyway,
I love these conversations, man. I love being able to talk to somebody that challenges both. We can respectfully challenge each other's beliefs and the way we understand things. And it's interesting, speaking on that specific kind of hang up. It's interesting that according to the account of creation, God actually created us as mankind, created us with the ability to not sin, right? In the beginning, we had, as human beings, we were created with the ability to not do bad things. We could be content with being with God and just pleasing him and doing good things. I believe God created us for the same reason we own dogs. I think he created us because he wanted a companion. And in the beginning, we had the ability to do that, but we also had the ability to do bad. We just didn't want to do bad because we were content with doing good. And this was one of the biggest transitions that happened with me when I got saved, is I used to take more pleasure in doing things that I knew were wrong. Say pornography, say telling little lies, say gossiping. I used to take more pleasure in doing those things than I took pleasure in doing what I knew was good, right? Well, when temptation entered the equation, mankind chose that we deviated from that contentment that he created us for, and we chose to alter the trajectory of our species as a creation. Now, the interesting thing is God knew all this was going to happen when he created us. Mm-hmm. He's omnipotent, right? He knew all this was going to happen before he ever created us. But he had a plan for that. He had a plan. He knew we were going to deviate, but he had a plan to reconcile us back to him. And that was Jesus Christ.
So I guess respectfully,
yeah, man,
with the dog reference, because you brought it up.
Oh Lord.
Well, so in breeding dogs, raising dogs, training dogs, etc. In that same reference, if I have a 6-week-old drivey Malinois puppy, and my expectation of the pup is companionship, right? But I don't teach him how to be my companion properly. Yeah. That's going to go horribly fucking wrong.
Yes.
Right. And so to me, that's where I struggle with it, is there's such a disparity, person to person, community to community, culture to culture, country to country, what have you, between, the lighthouses of Christianity in terms of teaching. Like in some areas it's very strong and very influential and works very well. In other areas it's woefully absent and it's an absolute fucking nightmare. Yeah. So I'm not naive to the fact that is the case. And I agree with you that the tenets of Christianity, I think for anybody, irrespective of whether or not you believe Jesus even existed or that he died to save us, et cetera, is that outside of that, if you follow the guidelines of Christianity, I think you're probably going to live a pretty good life, a good, decent life anyway.
Yeah. And that's, when you get down to it, like that statement right there, that's the bottom line of what we need to be hearing as a culture or as a nation right now. I share my testimony, or try to, on every single show that I get to go on. And I mean, I told you that's what drives me to travel and do these things. And ultimately, if you just can't reconcile with who Christ said he was, that's not a hit on you, man. Like I actually believe that the ability to believe in Christ is provided and gifted to you by Christ. Now that's a really hard topic to get into, man.
Have you seen The Matrix?
Yeah.
It's like the Oracle where she says, "Watch out for the pot," and then it's like, if I hadn't said anything, would you still have broken it? Yeah, it's kind of that same thing. But I guess.
But ultimately, you're right. If you can't reconcile with that, please just understand that the foundation of the moral principles of Scripture are good things to adhere to in terms of a standard. Yeah, in terms of a standard.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that at all. I think it all makes very good sense. And to your point, I think there is a lot of data that not just suggests, but I would say proves that there's a direct correlation between living within those guidelines. And if you take a look at the relationship between that and what the society is represented as, that's not an accident. Again, I'm not lost on that. I just, back to the dog reference, it's like if I bred a litter of puppies and I've got 10 of them and I give 2 to competent dog trainers, 2 to novice dog trainers, 2 to 2 teenage dipshits, and then 2 to 2 5-year-olds, there's going to be a massive disparity on the environment that I'm putting them in, which equates to the end product of what those dogs are when they're mature adults. And for the dogs, in this case, if that's us, how do you decide who goes where and who gets that kind of, we'll call it preferential treatment? Because me handing two well-bred puppies that are genetically, not identical, but from the same 2 parents, they're genetically very closely related as the rest of them, but they go to loving environments where it's super consistent. And then I send 2 to 2 crackheads that forget to feed the fucking things. Like how is that cool on my part to pick and choose, where they go and what they're exposed to. So anyway, I'll let you respond and then we can move on.
No, I mean, again, you have the greatest questions, man. And there are people who have literally studied and tried to nail down the answer to that question that you just asked. Mm-hmm. They've spent their entire lives trying to nail down. And you could look at that in perspective of, you know, you would hear it called predestination. How are you predestined to have the opportunity to be with the good dog trainer, right?
Yeah.
And how is that fair, right? And the ultimate answer is there are so many things about the nature of God, the creator of the universe, and how he operates and how all of this is happening, that we can't nail down the exact answer to a question such as that. And I have to accept the fact that I can't give you a clearly defined answer to that. You know, that's a tough one. And we don't understand how exactly God interacts with us in that way. Who does he provide the ability to believe upon his name to? And how are they selected for that position? If you want to think it's that way, if you want to think it works that way. I'm sad that I can't give you an answer, but I'm also very glad that I don't serve a God in which I can understand all aspects of how he interacts with his creation. Because if I did understand every aspect of him and the way he operates and the things he has told to me about himself, if I understood it all, it really wouldn't be a God worth worshiping. And I have to reconcile, I've had to reconcile with that in my own mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, what I will say is it's both refreshing and I respect the fact that you answer it that way, because a lot of people don't, you know, whether it's smoke and mirrors or it's an excuse or whatever. And to me, like it starts with at least being, you know, having the honesty to say, fuck, I don't know, you know. Now, granted, you put it way more eloquently than just saying, yeah, I'm not sure. But
you know, the beginning, the Bible says the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And what that means in layman's terms is the beginning of wisdom. The very beginning of wisdom is understanding that you don't know anything, that you're insignificant.
Yeah,
I really don't know much at all.
Yeah. I don't know jack shit.
When you really define that term, like, what do you know?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Very few things. Yeah. That's the beginning of wisdom, man.
No, I could not agree more. 100%. This unquestionably is in the record books for the longest lightning round so far. But
I'm sorry, Mike.
No, don't be. I mean, to me, that's a good title to hold. Favorite childhood memory?
Probably. I'm just going to go off the cuff when I wanted a new backpack and my mom forced me to do a 6-mile trail run with her to get the backpack.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Is your mom still around?
She is.
She is, yeah. Good relationship with her?
Amazing woman.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is your morning routine on a normal day, if that exists in your life, when you're at home, not traveling, just a standard day? Do you have this is what time I get up and let's say the first 3-4 hours of the day?
I wake up at 7 o'clock. I read for about an hour. I PT as soon as I'm done reading. Usually PT till about noon. That could be CrossFit. It could be a long run. It could be a swim, triathlon, whatever. I'm very dynamic in that. Then I finally eat my first meal, and then I go to work and generally work the rest of the day till 4 or 5. Spend time with my wife. So I guess we went a little past morning, but that's my daily routine.
Yeah. As far as that first 3 or 4 hours, and you didn't mention eating at all in there. Do you wait to eat till a certain time, or how does that work?
I generally don't eat till 11 o'clock, maybe noon, right around there. I eat 2 times a day. Yeah. So I eat there at what most people would call lunchtime or dinner. Yeah. You know, old school people call lunchtime dinner, but that's when, and then I eat again around 6 o'clock.
So you have dinner and supper, right?
Dinner and supper.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, yeah, that's it.
I do it. Do you prescribe to a particular style of eating? As far like if you were to put a label on it, not that you need to, but I mean, do you stay away from certain things or focus on others, or is there a rhyme or reason to what you eat?
I'm not super specific about my diet. I do listen to my body. I try to listen to what my body is craving, and usually that's a big ribeye steak.
Yeah, amen. Yeah. I'm right there with you. Fruits and vegetables, or not a ton?
Not a ton.
Yeah.
I'm a ribeye man. Usually have a little veggies, and I do like rice.
Yeah.
I like rice too. So
amen. Workout wise, you mentioned PT. Is that is there always running involved? Is there weights? Is it calisthenics? What does a workout look like?
It depends on what I'm training for. If I'm getting tuned up to win a race, then it's going to be heavy running. I'm in a phase right now where I'm very well balanced in terms of how I train. It's probably split half and half between a functional type of weight workout and running. And it may do both of those both of those in a single day. But when you really get in ultra running, when you really want to get competitive, you've got to cut most of the weight training out and you have to run. There's no substitute for running. And extra weight, even in the form of muscle, as an ultra runner, is pretty detrimental.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Is there a fighting weight for you that you try to get to or normally get to before races?
About 160. 160. About 160.
How tall are you?
6 foot.
6 foot.
Yeah.
All right. So originally, family-wise, where are you from, and what was the dynamic of your family like, other than having a badass mom from the sounds of it?
Yeah, I was originally from Northwest Georgia, so I've come full circle. I'm back there now. I have one little brother who is now my business partner. I grew up in a fairly, lower middle class home. There was, my dad was a hard worker, and my mom was a hard worker too, but she really forged us through our childhood, my brother and I. She actually had started a daycare where she could spend her time with us every single day, while dad was out working, and we were cared for, we were nurtured, we were fed, and North Georgia's a great place to grow up, and we were in the woods and having a good time, man.
What did your dad do?
My dad was a police officer for many years. Then he was a land surveyor, and he did that pretty much through our entire childhood.
That's an interesting transition. Is there a story behind that?
I don't. I'm sure there is. He's never told it to me though. Him and my grandfather owned a land surveying company together, so I think they just had decided to start that up and kind of branch out on their own. And that's really what I always knew him as. That was my first job, was holding the rod, with the prism on it, with my dad out, surveying lots and neighborhoods, and it's actually really, really rewarding, fun work.
That's cool. Having a police officer for a dad, are there any stories that stand out that were super impactful with him doing that? I know back, when you were a kid, law enforcement was viewed probably differently than it is now, especially in a place like that. But was there, any scary times or any things that stick out, from that time of being his son in that environment? The
biggest memories I have was that, him and his buddies sitting at the kitchen table, cleaning their pistols, man, really? Cleaning their guns.
That's interesting.
And they would let us handle the weapons and talk to us about them and make a weapon something that we weren't like enticed by. It was just a normal.
Yeah, it was a tool.
It was a tool, exactly. And so I still remember those times of him and his fellow officers sitting around the kitchen table cleaning their guns, man.
Was there? From a criminal activity standpoint, I mean, it sounds like it was kind of a smaller town.
Yeah, small town.
So not a lot of like typical crazy law enforcement stuff happening, I assume.
Not at all. I mean, they fought, they got after it. Everybody knew everybody. So nothing crazy, man.
Growing up within elementary, junior high, high school, were there particular sports that you played more than others, or did you play a bunch of them? Did you have a one sport?
No, I didn't. I wasn't a sports guy. I never was. I would say if I had to choose one, it would be baseball. Yeah. But I've only ever watched one football game in my life. Yeah. That was a few years ago. And
you're not missing much. So in high school, what kind of student and kid were you? Was it a smaller high school?
Yeah, it was a small high school. I was not the best student. I never really enjoyed school. I don't know what it was. Of course, my mom likes to brag on me and say because it didn't challenge me. But but you know, I'm not some super intelligent person, but
that's what moms are for.
Yeah, right? I mean, you know, schools do. You do have to say public schools have to teach to the lowest common denominator. Yeah. That's just part of the ball game, and I didn't enjoy it. And you know, the last day of high school, I had to go around to my teachers one by one and beg them to change my grades in their system so that I could graduate. And they obliged me, I think, because they were ready to get me out of their hair, man.
They were just tired of seeing you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or not seeing me when I was supposed to be there.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Was there a light switch moment for you in high school or even before that was the defining moment as far as joining the Navy and in particular becoming a SEAL?
It would have been after high school. So coming up, I don't recall ever even seeing a service member in uniform. So the military was never something that was on my radar or even that I thought I was good enough to do. Maybe it was even that. I didn't think that, you know, I was capable to be a part of an organization that was held in that high of a regard. But when I graduated high school and I knew I wasn't going to go to college, I went into just basically working on a small farm, and I just had the realization one day that if I didn't find something else that was going to take me somewhere else than where I was, then that was kind of going to be my lot in life. And I don't know what clicked. I just had that realization. I was just burnt out on, you know, making $300 or $400 a week and working 70 hours and just being dog tired all the time. And back then, the Navy was recruiting very heavily for the SEAL teams.
What year did you graduate? That
would have been 2006.
Okay.
Yep. And I remember looking on a laptop computer and seeing an ad banner pop up for the SEAL teams, you know, the program. And at this point, you could get a SEAL contract to actually join the Navy without having to go to the fleet first or going to a different A school. And so I looked into that, and that's what I guess you could say that's what I ended up doing. It took me a long time to get to BUDS.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
How did that go?
Well, first I had to pass a PST. I didn't know how to swim, had never really ran, nothing like that. So I had to pass the PST. It took me about 3 months to pass it one time.
Is that before you joined or after?
This was before I joined. Okay. Yeah. So just to get the contract, I'd take it every week. Finally passed it, got the contract, went to boot camp, and on the last day of boot camp, my RDCs pulled me out of formation, told me I had to go to medical. So I marched over to medical, and the dive medical officer there proceeded to tell me that I had a 7-centimeter pericardial cyst on my heart.
Oh, wow.
And it was an asymptomatic condition, so it would never bother me my entire life. But they were worried that if I did make it through BUDS, when I dove, that the pressure change would burst the cyst. So they kicked me out of the Navy. They basically just said, you know, you don't have the option of becoming a SEAL. And I could have went to the fleet, but breach of contract, I decided to get out. And after a hard time, I finally found a surgeon that would perform this elective surgery. And they opened my chest up and took this pericardial cyst off my heart. And I went back into the Navy less than a year after that heart surgery.
Was the surgery, I mean, it sounds invasive, but I mean, was it in terms of recovery? Like, was it a tough surgery and tough recovery?
Yeah, it was a pretty tough surgery. It was invasive. The pericardial cyst is a pretty rare condition. So it was interesting. The surgeon that did perform the surgery, he had never removed one of these things before. He was just studying other cases, you know, the few cases that there were out there of this condition. And when I came out of it, I think the biggest thing I had going for me is, you know, I was 18, 19 years old, and I recovered fast. The biggest, I guess, longest thing that took was to swim, because when I would stretch out in the water and try to get long in the water, it would pull on those muscles in my chest and cause a significant amount of pain. But yeah, after a few months, I was back good to go.
Yeah. Was there any, I mean, I know you said it was asymptomatic, but was there any difference performance-wise before having it and then after not? Did it make any difference?
I never would have known I had it if I wouldn't have went through a dive physical.
Yeah, wow. So when you went back in, how did you get to skip boot camp and go straight to BUDS at that point?
Thank God, yeah. Because I made it to the last day of boot camp. We were literally going to the thing where you exchange your hat that says recruit for your hat that says Navy.
Yeah.
Because I made it that far, when I did come back in, they let me skip boot camp. Now, I still had to sit on hold for a couple of months while they reviewed this case, because when I showed back up in the Navy, it was the same dive medical officer that had disqualified me was still in that position. So when I walked back into his office, obviously he was like, "What are you doing back here, man?" And so once I gave them the paperwork from the civilian surgeon, they pushed it all the way up and finally approved it.
Yeah. So a couple of months on hold, and then did you go through A school, or you went straight to BUDS?
Yeah, I went straight to BUDS. BUDS class 278. I went straight through with 278. No rolls, injuries, nothing.
Was there any aspect of SEAL training that stuck out for you as being easier than you thought it would be, or more difficult than you thought it would be?
No, the best way to answer that question for me personally, Mike, is BUDS was one of the, if not the only thing in my life personally that lived up to my expectations for what I expected it to be, right? It was actually probably harder as a whole than what I thought it would be.
Was there a hardest part for you?
The hardest part for me was probably the cold water, man.
Yeah.
The surf torture. I mean, you see how skinny I am. I've always been a skinny dude that grew up in the heat in North Georgia and the humidity and boy, that cold water, I did not like it one bit, man. But I had so much invested just to get on the start line to have a shot at this. I mean, I can truly say I would have died before. You know,
I don't doubt that. I mean, a lot of people say that. I believe you more than probably anybody.
I just had too much invested, man. It was a blessing to go into that with that much invested, you know?
Yeah.
Because I don't think I would have made it if I would have went in the first time.
Really?
I don't think I would have.
So the surgery added a level of currency dedication-wise, huh?
You never realize how hungry you are for something until it's taken from you.
Yeah, no, I understand. Absolutely. All right, so you graduate through BUDS. For me, not that you asked, but the island, San Clemente Island, was the worst part for me. Because it was...
You are not lying, man.
Yeah, because we went through in February. It was El Nino, so the water was like 58 degrees. The surf was like 12 feet. And we had a big class, and they fucking hated us. I know everybody says that the instructors hate you, but like they wanted to try to get rid of as many guys as possible. And so, yeah, it was miserable. But it was worse than Hell Week, absolutely. But
that's
all right,
a hard place, dude.
Yeah, no, it is. All right, so which SEAL team did you go to after you graduated?
So we went from BUDS to SQT, which is the newer pipeline. I guess they're still doing that. And then after SQT, I went to SEAL Team 8. And that's where I spent my entire career. Other than the very end, I was at Tradette for a little while doing training. We taught MAROPS, land warfare. Had a lot of fun there. But yeah, Team 8 was where I was at my whole career.
How many platoons, deployments did you do there?
I had 2 platoons, and then we had some kind of smaller deployment type trips, you know, in between those. So.
On your first deployment, where did you guys go on that one?
The first deployment was just a EUCOM deployment. Yeah, we were all over Europe and mostly just FID stuff.
Yeah. Was there any part of that correlated to some of the Middle East stuff, or was it segregated that way?
Yeah, it was segregated. I mean, the interesting thing about, I guess, my career in the teams, I'm still processing a lot of it, man. I've only been out for about 2 years, and you know, when I showed up to Team 8 had just got allocated to the continent of Africa, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so there were, when you go through the training pipeline, and the whole time you're being told, you know, you're going, man, you're going. And then you show up to team 8 and you're like, well, this team is actually allocated to a different region. It was, there were a lot of bad attitudes, man.
Yeah, I can see.
I mean, there were
I can see being salty about that.
I mean, there were a lot of bad attitudes, man. And you know, my entire career was, it was wrought with mistakes and bad attitudes and
how was your attitude towards that? Did you fall in that same mentality?
Yeah. You definitely you can't help it, man. I mean, you get sucked into it, and you know, it's always hard for me too to determine how much do we really say about this stuff, you know, because I feel like the SEAL teams have been painted, a picture of the SEAL teams have been painted. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's very few people who actually talk about what
some of the other shit that goes on.
Talk about what it's really like, man. Yeah. And you know, I don't know. It's hard to. I haven't processed it enough yet to really know what to do. And just, you know, I had during that first deployment, I had my sea daddy, Jake Hubman. He was my mentor. You know, I lost him after that. He killed himself after that first deployment, and just seeing the way that he was treated, and it's hard for me to reconcile with this stuff, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. You almost have in a way, there's a part of me that has a bone to pick.
Sure.
I don't know, but
yeah. No, I mean, I certainly understand where you're coming from. I mean, you know, there are different periods in my career that were fortuitous as far as deployment schedules, and there were some that were not so much, you know, and it didn't have anything to do with our skill level as a platoon or whether or not we were liked or not, or how well we worked together or any of that. It was really just dumb luck, you know. You know, my second platoon, we were slated to be like we were supposed to go to the Middle East, and then at the last minute they yanked the rug out, and we were going to go to Southeast Asia and spend, you know, we were going to deploy to Guam and do some exercises in the Philippines and go to Thailand, and, you know, the standard kind of lot that way. And then halfway through that, Iraq kicked off, and so we ended up going and doing that. And so as kind of a classic example is that it was supposed to be one thing, and then it turned into another, and then it, you know, turned into something else entirely. And none of that had anything to do with us.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing. You know, like we could have been the best platoon at Team 3. We could have been the worst. It wouldn't have mattered. Like that's just where we were at and kind of where we were destined to be, I guess. But
yeah, totally, man. Totally. Yeah. And I've had to, I think too, for me, a big part of, I've only been out of the Navy for like 2 years, and like a big part of this transition has been me coming to the understanding that I was a part of that organization, mm-hmm. but who am I now? Because I'm no longer a part of that organization. Like,
yeah,
I did everything they asked me to do. I earned the right to have my trident. But now who am I now? Because I'm no longer part of that organization anymore. And how do you interact with that past? Mm-hmm. Like,
it's tough.
How do you interact with that? You know what I mean? In terms of what do you share about it? Like, you know what I mean?
I do. I mean, it's, you know, I've been out for a while, you know, just over a decade now, and it is tricky. You know, there's a lot of dynamics that play a role in those decisions, and there's also, I think, the internal element that whatever it was that attracted you to that line of work in the first place, and whatever you possess within yourself to be able to succeed and thrive in that line of work, you know, means that you are wired different than most people. And when you go from that environment where that is truly your identity, you know, it's not a job, that is who you are, like to your core. That's, you know, what everybody thinks of you. Like, you're not Chad Wright, you're a Navy SEAL, and then you're Chad Wright, you know, and
yeah, exactly, man.
Yeah. And so I see it a lot. And I will say, you know, I feel very fortunate in that I didn't really struggle with that or run into that when I got out, for a number of reasons, which I'll share in a minute. But I see a lot of guys that they get out and their entire identity is attached to what they used to do, and now that's yanked out from under them and they're lost.
Yeah,
you know, and especially when they go from that to something very benign career-wise, like finance or insurance or fucking whatever. You know, they work in an office and they're dressed in a suit, and you can encapsulate their entire career, no matter how illustrious it was, in one bullet point as, oh yeah, that dude used to be a SEAL. Yeah, man. That's the extent of it, you know. And you could have spent 15 years getting your hands dirty for Uncle Sam doing some amazing shit, but now you're just some other dickweed in a tie that used to be a SEAL, and that's the most that anybody's going to squeeze out of that period of your life, and that is really difficult for most guys to deal with if they're not doing something like running until your legs fall off or letting dogs bite you in the nuts or whatever, you know. So
it's been essential to find a new mission. 100%.
Yeah, it's crucial. If you, and that's, you know, that was going to be my point, is that, you know, for me, I didn't struggle because it was a springboard out of the military right into setting up my own business and doing what I was passionate about. And to me, that's ultimately the key, is that, you know, you hear the question, you know, what's the meaning of life? And to me, it just boils down to one single word, which is purpose, whatever that is for each person. You know, is that if when they wake up, they're excited about what their day is going to bring them, they're going to be happy and they're going to feel fulfilled and they're going to feel like their life has meaning. On the transverse, if those things are absent, you're going to be a miserable fucking wretch. And that's where people, you know, turn to pain pills and booze and start a pistol because they're fucking miserable, you know, and it's sad. But, you know, anyway.
Yeah, and I think all that being said, I think it's worth to take a minute to recognize, even amongst this conversation that can really only be had between two team guys, because we're kind of the only type of people that could understand it. I think it's worth taking a moment to say that in spite of all the flaws and the difficult transitions and the struggles that all of us have, that I still truly believe that some of the best men on earth pass through the doors of naval special warfare.
Yeah, I could not.
I mean, without a doubt. And I think that's one of the things that I struggle with so much is to how to interact with that part of my past, because I have such a respect for that community because of the men who did make it what it stands for.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Man, that's a deep level of respect, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel very fortunate, and it sounds like age-wise you were in a pretty similar boat. I mean, from 18 to 30, I was surrounded by what it sounds like you would argue the same thing, were some of the greatest men on the face of the earth, you know, that were 10, 15, 20 years older than us, that had been there, done that collectively took all of us under their wings and turned us into men, frankly. You know, I mean, we grew up in the SEAL teams, you know. I mean, you're not a fucking man at 18. You know, just because the law says technically, you know, you're an adult, you're not, you know, and that path, I think about, you know, how wildly different my life would be if I had done anything else, you know, and it would be vastly different. I can rest assure you that you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking. Oh, yeah, you know, exactly there's no way. But that's interesting. I'm sorry to hear about your mentor taking his own life. I know that has plagued our community more than I think a lot of people would assume or expect or even believe. But so your first platoon was a Europe kind of training mission, foreign internal defense type of environment. you get back. What was the transition into the second platoon, and then ultimately where you went for that one?
Yeah, I got back home, and I guess the big thing that kind of you just jump right back into the training cycle, and you were going again, another ULT, and the next big rotation, we knew we were going to Africa. We didn't know where, and finally ended up going to Northern Africa when the Arab Spring was getting crazy, and the embassy in Benghazi was attacked, and that was not just isolated to that single area like most people think, because that's what the news focused on. So at the last minute, we shifted locations, and we went to North Africa, Tunisia, and that embassy had gotten hammered, dude. And we spent a couple of months there doing good work, and that was one of the highlights of that deployment.
From growing up as a kid in small town Georgia to all the trials and tribulations that took place of the challenges and obstacles you had to overcome just to become a SEAL, knowing what that job is, being driven to want to serve in that capacity, being what sounds like maybe a little salty and let down about the first deployment. Mm-hmm. Now you find yourself with all of that having transpired, and now here you are, varsity team, fucking Super Bowl, whatever. I know you're not a football guy. Yeah. Say baseball, it's the World Series, and you're up at bat, and now you're finally boots on the ground in an area where shit's going down. What is going through your mind?
I loved it, man. I mean, that was probably one of the coolest, real missions that we got to be a part of. And what was going through my mind, it teaches you how to really lean on your teammates in a deeper way, right? And it teaches you how to trust your teammates in a whole new way. Yeah. And because you especially in a place where like we weren't on some big, installation or some big established base, and it was a lot of growing. It was a lot of growing in terms of taking the job seriously, and it was interesting.
Yeah.
So,
is there a couple of incursions or instances, whether you want to call them missions? I mean, it sounds like it was all kind of one long one in that regard, but I will say operations individually or specifically that stand out that you can share and kind of walk us through that you guys went through that were of note.
Yeah, I mean, probably, I guess the main challenge that we faced within the scope of that specific mission, if you want to call it that, was dealing with the incompetency of the State Department, and trying to get all of their people essentially herded into a safe location. And while we were there, these, if you want to say riots or attacks, they would pop up fairly frequently. And it was like herding cats, man, trying to get these people into a safe location while these pop-up things were happening. And another cool part of that mission too was working with a Green Beret Special Forces unit called a SIF team. Yeah. Those guys were there, and it was my first time actually getting to integrate with another unit and work side by side and share tactics and come up with a plan. Yeah. For what we were doing. The other stuff that was going on kind of in the background, I don't know that it'd be proper to talk about it.
Sure, it would.
On
but, of course it would.
Yeah.
On mic drop, it's always proper to talk about it.
Like I say, man, it's
you won't
always,
get in trouble if you talk about it.
It's always like, how much do you go into specific detail about the different all the different components of what's happening in an area like that, that involve other 3-letter agencies and other, than just us.
Sure.
You know what I mean? There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, you're not the only show in town.
No, it was a complex environment for sure.
Yeah. Could you speak to any hairy situations, not disclosing who was there or what the goal was or anything like that, but just like, ground level, almost first person, orientation of kind of, something where maybe you were in a mentality or a mindset of, I don't know if this is gonna pan out well for us, or were there situations that happened like that?
We really never got in a situation there where we felt like we were about to lose control. I felt like once we arrived there, we established a good foothold and came up with a defensive strategy quickly enough that there was never a moment where it was like, holy crap, we're about to lose this structure, right? Yeah. Some of the weirdest moments, I guess, for me there is kind of after we had been there for a little while and our presence was known and everything had kind of calmed down a little bit. I guess the weirdest feelings I remember having, or the most eerie feelings, would be just walking from that compound to actually where the safe house where we were staying in, and with an MP5 in your backpack and a concealed carry weapon, and it's the sun's going down and the call for prayer starts going off, and the same people who were gathered in the streets 2 or 3 days before, they're watching you, they're patterning you, they know where you're at, and there were many a times I walked back and forth that I felt the hair on my back, the back of my neck stand up, man. Yeah.
Which for you is quite a bit, right? Not back then.
Not back then, no. We actually did get to grow our beards out there, so that was pretty sweet.
How close was yours then to what it is now?
Oh, nowhere near. Nowhere near.
I mean, how many months or years of growth do you have there?
Oh, I haven't shaved since I got out.
Oh, no shit. It's a couple of years worth. Yeah. That's badass. Were there times where you guys were getting fired upon and or attacked, like actually attacked, or was it pretty kind of in the shadows type moving around? Yeah, it was more in the shadows. Yeah, essentially the initial wave, we were QRF, right? So the initial wave, they come in and they had hit that place. They had burned like 400 vehicles and smashed the windows out and all that. And so by time we as the QRF kind of got in the area, that had kind of melted away. Yeah. In thinking through what took place on your first deployment in Europe with your being reborn, if you will, did that change your mentality, mindset, attitude, or how you conducted yourself differently in the second deployment versus the first?
Well, this actually happened. I actually got saved during that second deployment. Oh, okay. So once we were done in that right there in North Africa, we actually went back to rejock before we went out to the next location, and that's actually when that happened. Oh, okay. So it was on that deployment. That was, I don't know, that deployment was probably 5 or 6 months long. Yeah. And yes, it did change. It changed me tremendously.
Can you share where you went after the rejock in Europe?
Yeah. So after we finished there, we went out to Nigeria, and we were working with Nigerian Special Forces. They were fighting against a really nasty group called Boko Haram. Yeah. And we worked with those guys for a couple of months.
Was that mostly FID type stuff, or?
Yeah, that was mostly training them, equipping them, advising them. Yeah. And great group of dudes. I had a blast out there doing that job, man.
Any close calls when working with them, or was it pretty?
I don't know about close calls, man. I do remember. I'll never forget. We were out on the range training them one day, and we had supplied them all with SIG P226s, same pistols that we used. And I'll never forget one of those dudes punching out to take his first shot in double action, and I assume his finger was not strong enough to pull the trigger. So I'm watching him, and he's pulling, the hammer's coming back, but he just can't get that first shot off. And he looks around, and he tries to make sure that nobody's looking, and he cocks the hammer back to first action, and it takes his first shot.
Good old long draw of the double action.
Yeah, man. Yeah, those guys were they were something else, dude. That's a weird country, man, because it's Nigeria's split. The northern half is Muslim and the southern half is predominantly Christian. Yeah. And it was really cool to see that special operations unit, essentially their equivalent of SEALs. It was a mixture of Christian and Muslim guys.
Oh, wow.
Because they were coming from all over the country to be part of this special forces unit. And it was really cool to see how well they interacted together in spite of the religious differences that was essentially tearing their country in half.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so interestingly, I mean, so you had just come from a pretty religious experience yourself, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
An awakening of sorts. So how did that change who you were as a man, as a SEAL, as an operator after that?
Yeah, I mean, it changed everything about me as a man, for sure. I think the way to sum it up is I was in a place where, like we talked about earlier, I found more fulfillment in doing what I knew was right than what I knew I had been doing that was wrong. And that's in terms of how I interacted with people, how I viewed people, not just my teammates, but anybody who I was around. It changed the way I talked. It changed the way I viewed the world. And all that kind of happened nearly overnight.
Yeah.
And it was noticeable, by the guys that I was there with, that I was working with.
Yeah. Did they ask you about it?
Yeah. They totally asked me about it, man. And, I think that's one really cool thing about at least that specific platoon is nobody judged. I saw very few instances in the teams where anybody judged anybody based off of how they wanted to believe.
Yeah.
You would think it would be different.
Yeah. I mean, to me, one of the interesting and I think refreshing simplicities of the military in general, or at least when we were in, it sounds like it's maybe less that way now, social experiment wise, but is that you really can kind of reduce most decisions and perspectives down to one question, which is, does this make us a better warfighting force? Yes, do it. No, don't do it. But I think, that's on the macro, the entire military or Department of Defense. But you can go all the way down to the micro, is that my opinion of you is going to be based really on one fucking thing. Can you do your job, and do I trust to go to war with you? Yes, then I love who you are, right? If the answer is no, I don't want to fucking work with you, and I don't care what other exterior things exist. Skin color means nothing. Hair color means nothing. Religion means nothing. None of those personality traits or aesthetic traits mean anything. The only thing that matters is, do I trust you to squeeze my shoulder going into a room?
Yep.
And so to me, there's a simplistic beauty in that it gives you an ability to live that way. And I think that's one thing that, unfortunately, most people never have the pleasure of experiencing, being able to be in an environment like that where you truly can be singularly focused on one thing, and there's really nothing that divides you, other than job competency.
Yeah. It's one thing that the platoons do
very
really good job at, man.
Yeah, I mean, the higher up you go, the less it's that way, I think, military-wide. But all right, so you get back from that deployment. What did you go to TRADET right after that, or did you do other stuff?
Yeah, we did. I did some augments with the Secret Service counter assault team.
How was that?
That was with Mr. Obama. So we did some.
I noticed you call him Mr. and not President. I'm just busting your chops.
Bad, President. Yeah. we did some work with them over in Africa in a couple different locations.
Can you share the nature of what you were doing, or is that?
Yeah, again, I don't know how much
whatever you're comfortable
needs
with.
to be put out, but essentially it was we were the kind of heavy hitters.
Oh, okay.
If something
yeah.
Went down, and we had a plan to get it to extract him out of the situation, and we were there, ready, prepared to execute that plan.
I gotcha.
In the event, it was a really difficult mission, because as a SEAL, you're trained to be so offensive. I mean, we're always going to try to ambush, or we're always going to try to stack everything in our favor, in any scenario.
Yeah.
But with that job, you're running purely defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an uncomfortable place to be, man.
It is. I mean, reactionary is tricky and uncomfortable that way, But it sounds like, you guys were the Secret Service's sledgehammer or catch dog in hunting dog terms, right?
Yeah, totally. And also the spotlight is so on everything that's happening in that environment. And so, there are things that happen where you want to hesitate, because there's so much that rides on a decision that you make. I mean, I remember being out, President Obama was in a meeting, and we were basically the inner security for that building he was in, and the local guys had kind of the outer ring of security. And, we were told if anything breaks through that outer ring, you eliminate that threat, right? Yeah. Because we were real close. And so local dude breaks through that outer perimeter. The local dudes are yelling at him, trying to stop him. He's on a little moped, got a big jacket on, and
it's 90 degrees and he's got a jacket.
He's got a big jacket on. Yeah, it's hot outside. And he's just, he's rolling straight towards us, man. And, you draw down on this dude with your rifle, and the whole time you're thinking, if I pull the trigger on this dude, and he's not really a threat, there's going to be some severe repercussions.
Yeah.
And so luckily in that scenario, the guy sees a bunch of dudes coming out, drawing down on him with rifles, a bunch of white dudes, and he stops.
Yeah.
And he ended up just being an idiot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I mean, it's like you got your hands tied.
Yeah.
It felt like you had your hands tied.
Sure. Especially coming from the environment you were just in, I imagine you're even more, not trigger happy, but on edge more than you would be maybe if you went straight over there, or that was like your main gig.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Did you do one augment with them there? Or
I did two augments with them. Yeah.
And similar missions.
3 different locations. Yeah. Two augments. Yeah. Similar missions. Yeah. I got the utmost respect for those guys, man. Yeah. They do a hard freaking job.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of stress and travel and moving pieces to the job they do, getting some insight into it, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. The planning that goes into that if they've done their job right, that nobody even realizes exists, or that they were there, is mind bending.
Yeah.
So you come back from that, and then you went to Trinidad after that. Is that?
So I come back from that. Yeah. And I actually, was, thinking that we were just going to roll into another ULT. Mm-hmm. And when I got back from that, I realized for the first time that my wife was dying from addiction.
Oh, wow. So were you married this whole time?
Yeah, I've been married the whole time.
Okay. When did you get married? At what point?
I got married just shortly after I arrived at Team 8.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, just kind of right after SQT.
The hometown sweetheart kind of thing? Or?
Yeah. We knew each other since we were 16 years old.
So you're over there and you realize she's dying of addiction. Can I ask what kind?
Pills.
Pills.
Yeah, opiates and benzos and
everything. Huh?
All that stuff. Yeah.
What made you realize that?
Well, when I got back from that second deployment, it had the addiction had progressed to a place where essentially it was multiple back-to-back overdoses, and she would spend days in the bed, just kind of in a coma essentially. So it had progressed to the point where it was like, wow. Prior to that, I had traveled so much in training and deploying or whatever. I've been gone so much, it hadn't progressed to a point that it was noticeable for somebody like me that was gone all the time.
Yeah.
I'd come home and spend a couple, 2 or 3 days with her, and then I'd be gone again. But this time it progressed so far that you couldn't hide it.
Yeah.
And she was, it's amazing that she didn't pass away.
Yeah.
But she, I think, came to the conclusion in her own mind that I've either got to, I'm at the point now that I'm going to have to get clean or it's going to be over.
Yeah. Did you give
her
that?
That kind of railroaded me, man.
Did you give her that talk?
No, I didn't. I was angry. Yeah, I was angry because this scenario really sidetracked me in career-wise. You know what I mean? I had to make a decision very quickly. Am I going to be here and serve my wife, or am I going to give myself to the Navy? Like, am I going to give myself to my wife or give myself to the Navy?
It's a tough choice.
Yeah, it's really tough, man. And when you go to your leadership, at least the people that I was with then, and you tell them that, you don't get embraced. I mean, you feel a little, you almost get ostracized.
Really?
You know what I mean? But that's the decision that I made, was like, I had to go to the people that needed to know.
Yeah.
And tell them that, hey man, I got to take a knee here. Like, where can I go so that I can be around enough to at least ensure that my wife makes it through this process?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that ended up being TRADET.
Yeah. What was that path like? I mean, I feel like we've had enough people on. We don't need to get too heavy into TRADET. It's essentially training platoons at certain skill sets to deploy. I'd love to focus on the at-home component of that, of what that was like for you. If you can sum it up, I guess in one sentence, it would be learning to die to yourself. And I think the biggest key for me was really reconciling with the fact that this thing had progressed into a disease. It was something that she had no control over. And so that was really key for me to understand that, because prior to coming to that conclusion, you're just angry at the person. You're like, what the crap, man? Yeah.
Why don't you just
stop
doing this? So I had to come to the realization that she can't stop. Like, this is going to take treatment. And then it's a matter of sacrificing everything that you wanted to do, everything that you thought you were going to do, in order to serve the person that you love and to honor the covenant that you have with that person. That's freaking hard, man.
I can't think of a more selfless act. You know, I mean, I don't know what that would be.
Well, when you know, if you were to ask me what is the number one attribute that I would look for in a teammate, it would be selflessness first. Mm-hmm. If every dude in a SEAL platoon is focused more on their teammate and serving their teammate, then they are focused on their own personal needs and desires, it would be an unstoppable force. And there have been platoons that operated like that, and they were unstoppable.
Yeah.
But that applies in marriage too. The only difference is in marriage you can just quit. Mm-hmm. There's that option that's lingering and available and accepted widely by our culture. And there was a very distinct moment that I wanted to quit. You know, I had worked hard to finally be in the position that I was in, and you know, my desire was to keep going. And I wanted to say, heck with this, man. Like, why am I sacrificing everything for this? And I called my little brother again, and he simply said to me, I told him, I said, I can't do this any longer. Like, this is crazy. And he just said to me, Chad, you don't have a choice. Like, he reminded me of that covenant that I had made, and that actually means something. And once I made that decision to take quitting off the table, then it was a process of learning to die to myself, which, by the way, I'm still in the process of learning to die to myself.
Yeah. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, it's, you know, addiction is something that stays with the person their entire life. An addict's life, and by the way, I'm speaking from my perspective. I'm not an addict myself, just from what I've seen.
Maybe to running. You could argue.
Yeah, maybe to running.
Punishing yourself.
But, you know, so we recently had another bout with active addiction. And, you know, I realized really quickly that I had not completely died to myself, and I was not completely invested in serving my wife, because the first thing that I thought was, how many more times are you going to drag me through the mud?
This was how recent?
It was very recent.
Yeah.
And so that was a red flag to me. And I thought, no, man, I have to change that from how many more times are you going to drag me through the mud to let's go through the mud together. You know what I mean?
I do.
And
I am curious, just in my own, because I've never met your wife, and for that matter, you know, it's the first time I've met you. I have a ton of respect for you. But in the playing devil's advocate, is that sacrilege to call it that?
No, you're good, Mike.
Is there a red line for you? Is there a point where you'd say, you know what, that's it? Or is it you'll go down on the ship with her?
Yeah, I would. There wouldn't. There is. I can't see. I mean, I think biblically, there are some lines that and I would probably adhere to those biblical lines, and you know, biblically, Christ in the New Testament, there are lines in terms of adultery, in cases of adultery or in cases of abuse, things like that. But with the struggle that we face as a couple, and that struggle is recovery, mm-hmm. There is no line. Yeah. It would no.
You know, I mean, to me, I think the distinction then for alleviating a term, the term of abuse would be in that it's a disease and not a choice, right? Is that?
Yeah, yeah.
And you'd make that distinction.
And by abuse, I mean like physical abuse. Like, you know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, to me, mental abuse is no better.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
And to me, there is an element of, well, let me take one step back, is that I'm not pretending to be in your shoes. I have a truckload of respect for your dedication to your wife and to everything in your life. It's inspiring and noteworthy, no two ways about it. For me, it's difficult to look at something purely as a disease and not at least somewhat of a choice. When you compare, say, a 5-year-old with leukemia, right? Like, to me, that's very clear cut. That's a fucking disease that they had no part in. Again, and this is not me saying that addiction isn't a disease. I do get it. You know, I've known plenty of people and agreed, like, while myself, I am not an addict, I've seen people that I trusted and respected the hell out of that struggled enough with it for me to say, yeah, there's something more there than just they're choosing to be an asshole. I'm not saying that that's not the case, but I do think that there is at least an element of choice to it. I mean, there's some element. And so my take, again, and just again, I guess from a devil's advocate standpoint, is that the amount of mud that you're being drugged through, could one not argue that is, in essence, sort of abuse, or it could be taken that way, mental abuse that way? You know,
that's the interesting dynamic in terms of addiction and seeing it as a disease, is because if I look at it from a purely logical standpoint, without being in the mind of an addict, you have to draw the conclusions that the first step is a choice. But what are the components of that person, or the flaws in the wiring? If you want to call it flaws, we're all flawed. But what is it in their wiring that leads them to that choice?
Sure.
So, you know, even that initial choice to start using that drug, how were they influenced to make that choice?
Yeah.
You know, in a lot of cases, they're influenced by a medical professional, and they're simply following instructions that they think are going to make them better.
Yeah.
But it becomes very quickly something that is all-consuming.
Yeah.
Addiction is, I have seen it. It is more powerful than a mother's love. It's more powerful than sex. It's more powerful than money. It is what I believe to be the most powerful, influential force on earth.
I don't disagree with that. And I think you bring up a good point. One that admittedly, you know, that I've thought of it from that perspective. I won't say that I never thought of it from that perspective. But I like the way that you put it. And I do think, you know, ultimately the choices that you make, you know, there's been enough studies on, you know, the role the amygdala plays and whether or not you really are in a conscious control of a lot of your choices, and that there's kind of a debate or an argument saying that you're in control of far less things than you realize. And I do think there's a lot of truth to that. So I think that's a super fair point, and I appreciate you bringing it up. Again, I want to reiterate, though, that my hat is off to you. I'm not going to take it off because I'm bald and look like a penis without hair, but I do think that it's amazing what you're doing, and it's so rare in today's day and age to see the kind of dedication and commitment between spouses that you have with your wife, and I think that should be commended. But
well, I appreciate that, Mike, and I think we should all keep in perspective what are the things that are going to be with you for your whole life. Like, you know, I think we see so many times guys and girls that make the choice to, or they choose their career before they choose that person that is their spouse, and that career is freaking over, man.
Yeah,
I'm so glad I made the choice that I made.
Yeah, because
I'm going to tell you right now, man, my life is better than anybody else's life listening to this podcast. I will vouch for that.
Yeah.
That's I'm saying that for myself.
Yeah.
I mean, the life that I have with the woman that I love is better than any Navy SEAL thing that could have been provided to me. Like, It is unbelievable. So think about that if you're listening to this.
Yeah.
What's going to stay with you for the duration of your life?
Yeah.
Very few things, and be dedicated to those things.
Yeah. I agree 100%. And I think for everybody as an individual, if you can't look inward and say, like, I have the best life that I know of, you know, or I'm living, you know, the life that I'm living now is better than everybody else's. Like, if you can't say that, I think you should strive to be able to say that.
Yeah, man.
You know, I truly do, because I feel the same way. You know, and I think you're doing it right if that's how you feel. You know?
Yeah.
So at what point, whether it was in trade ed or where did the running bug come from? Because you didn't grow up running. Sounds like you were, you know, middle of the road running wise throughout SEAL training, or at least that wasn't what you were, you know, doing. I mean, it's part of the job. But so at what point was it like staring you in the face saying it's time to run?
It was toward the very end of my time in the Navy when I knew that chapter of my life was about to come to a close, and I had lived so long, my entire adult life to this point, in a place that challenged me physically and mentally in so many ways. Almost every single day. I mean, that's almost every single day that you spend in the military doing really any job. I guarantee you're being challenged physically and mentally on some level. And I love that, man. I loved that aspect of being in the teams. And I realized that I was going to need something else in my life that challenged me in that way. And so I just saw a advertisement for a 50-mile trail run, and I didn't even think it was humanly possible for someone to run 50
Why don't
miles.
I try that?
Yeah, that was exactly my thoughts. And I said, man, this could be that thing. You know, I've done a lot of running as a SEAL. I'm fit, and I went and tried it. I went and ran that race, and it freaking obliterated me, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't train for it. I was just generally fit.
Yeah.
And I thought,
typical team guy.
I thought, man, this can be a really cool thing that can give me something to strive to do, that's going to keep me sharp, that's going to continue to teach me new things about myself, and give me an opportunity to push into new areas.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so when you went through that, I'm curious where your mind was during that being obliterated. Did you finish it?
Oh, yeah. I finished.
Is that where you learned to focus on the next step, or was your mind all over the place during that one?
Oh, no. I learned to focus on the next step definitely during that race. During BUDS.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah. I think that was something that was ingrained in me during BUDS. Yeah. And so I utilized, that's the only way that I finished it.
Yeah.
Is because I had all these kind of tools and mental toughness and things that had been ingrained in me from my career. That's the only way I got through that race.
Yeah.
And it was,
so
I was satisfied, man.
Yeah. So after that, what was the next one, and what was the pipeline training wise going from doing that, and what was your next race and the in between? Well,
after I finished that 50 miler, it was funny because I didn't do great at it, but I finished middle of the pack with no training. And one of my buddies from the team, he actually looked at me and he said, man, I think you could actually win one of these things. And it's funny, man. It's funny how one little thing someone says to you, one little piece of encouragement can kind of change your mindset about what you think you're capable of.
Yeah.
And when he said that to me, and again, this was somebody that I respected, a very close friend of mine. And when he said that, I thought, okay, let's get serious and see if we can really go and do well at one of these. So I ran a few other 50-mile races, maybe 2 more, just to kind of get used to that type of running. And trained up to run a really difficult 100-miler. My first 100-miler was one of the most difficult 100-milers on the East Coast. It's called the Cruel Jewel. It's 106 miles with 33,000 feet of climbing.
Wow.
And also the same descent. And I went there, placed 8th place.
Wow.
That was an international field that year. Runners came from all over the world to compete. And so finishing in that top 10 gave me even more confidence that maybe what my buddy said was right. And also, that being my first 100-mile race, I got obliterated all over again. It was on a whole nother level than that 50-miler. Like, I ran a fever for 2 days after that race.
Oh.
My body was just completely wrecked. And
how long did that take? 106 miles.
That race in that terrain, think I ran that in about 26 hours, 26, 27 hours.
Wow.
Something like that. All these races, the time is relative to the terrain the races ran in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last man standing that you did 38 hours, how many miles was that?
122.
122. Is that the farthest you've gone?
That is my furthest distance, yeah.
All right, so you get 8th place in the Cruel Jewel at 106 miles. From a training standpoint, had you brought in any other coaches, consultants, experts, what have you, to help you prepare and train from a nutrition standpoint, a training, regimen standpoint? Or was it all you were just figuring it out on your own? Yeah,
I was figuring it out along the way, and I think I had a huge advantage because of the lifestyle that I had been living and going through BUDS, and you get to really know your body very well doing that job.
Yeah.
You know the things you need to pay attention to, and you know the things that are just naturally just there's discomfort, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's even how I train to this day, is I just listen to my body. And I go out for a run in the morning. I don't have a plan for how long I'm going to run. I see how my body responds to it, and it may be a 8-mile run, it may be a 18-mile run. And I think for me personally, that's the most effective way to train, especially and have longevity.
Yeah.
I could run myself into the ground. I mean, I could come up with a training plan that would run me into the ground, but I want to have longevity in the sport. And so that's how I've chosen to train. And obviously you ramp the intensity up when you're training for a specific race, but you ramp the intensity up only for a short period.
Yeah.
About 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
Yeah.
During especially that 8 weeks, from a nutrition standpoint, at that point, are you still just rocking ribeyes, or are you bringing in a ton of rice and way more carbohydrates?
I'm eating whatever I want to eat, man. Yeah. I mean, I'll eat ice cream every night, rice, bread, tons of steak.
You're going to Sizzler.
Yeah, man. I'm going to eat whatever my body is craving during that training cycle, because those weeks when you're really ramping it up, you're putting in upwards of, some athletes will put in 160 miles of training in a week. A big week for me would be 80, maybe 90 miles in a week.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
from a gear standpoint, is there I see you got no bulls on. I think you have Hoka's on over there, right? Is there a brand of footwear that you kind of swear by for these races? Is it terrain dependent?
It is terrain dependent. I think overall Hoka makes the best running shoe out there.
See, I'm flat-footed as fuck, and I can't wear them. Like, they make me feel like I'm walking on like Nerf footballs. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
In a horrible way. Like, I feel like I'm tipping over and rolling my fucking ankle. Like, I've tried them a few times, and I can't wear them. Like, I have to wear more of the Chuck Taylor style, like flat foot shoes. That's what I'm wearing right now. They're like flat. They're 4 flat feet or whatever, or they're supposed to mimic being barefoot, basically. But I can't wear those barefoot shoes. Those things feels like socks that are all between your toes.
Oh yeah, man. No, I don't think that's good for your feet. I think shoes are very specific to the athlete. It's the same with training. It's the same with nutrition.
Yeah.
It's all you have to put in the time to be able to compete, because you got to put in the time, because you got to know what your body needs, what it likes in terms of nutrition, in terms of food, in terms of training load. There's no substitute for it.
Yeah.
I wish there was a secret. Everybody wants the secret. The secret is there is no secret other than putting in the time to figure all that stuff out.
Yeah, for yourself. No, that's spot on. I love it. During your races, what do you eat and drink?
During my race, I try to stick mainly to fruit.
Really?
Yeah, I changed my diet completely from what I would be eating every day. Running those distances can create extreme stomach distress. It's usually the number one thing that takes people out of an ultramarathon is their stomach stops working. And if you can imagine your stomach bouncing up and down inside of you for 24, 28, 30 hours, it makes total sense. Yeah. So I found for me, fruit gives me the energy that I need. It's easily digestible. It doesn't upset my stomach. And then for a little fat and protein, I'll put some peanut butter in there and try to keep it very, very simple, man.
Yeah. What fruits? Is it all kinds, or are there a few specific?
I like melons, cantaloupe, watermelon. Those are probably my two favorite, but I'll eat berries and stuff like that too, blueberries. And
Is there a volume that you're going through with that stuff? Like in the last man standing, like, is it like how much fruit did you go through during that race?
And a lot. In terms of calorie intake, again, every athlete's different. For me, I'm trying to hit an absolute minimum of 100 calories per hour.
Yeah.
Some of those hours I'll take in upwards of 400 or 500 calories. And usually I will also have one of the little gels on me, like a goo gel or something, because if you're out there on the trail, sometimes, your blood sugar will plummet, and you need something to bring you out of the hole real quick. Yeah. So that's kind of like my emergency. That's like my nitrous. Yeah. If I need to get out of the hole, it's got a little caffeine in it. So that'll allow me to get out of that hole and get to where I can get some food with some substance to it,
Do you take caffeine normally? Like day to day?
Dude, I'm a coffee man, brother.
Yeah. I'll tell you, the ultra running niche, if you want to call it that, is fascinating, man. It's really, really fascinating. I've known a few guys that have done a few of them, but I think it just seems like you're at a whole different level with that stuff.
The most valuable thing about it is not really, for me, it's not the running aspect. The competitive nature of it is fun, but the most valuable thing about it is what it shows you about yourself. And like, it gives you the opportunity to learn patience. It gives you the opportunity to force yourself to stay present. It gives you the opportunity to be deliberate about your actions, your diet, the words that are coming out of your mouth. All those things influence your success, and all those things also influence your success in life. Yeah. And so that to me is the most valuable aspect of ultra running. And I think every human being should run a 100-mile race just once in their life. Yeah. Because you get to really go to a new place. And if you don't do the right things in terms of mindset, you're not going to make it through. Yeah. And that's okay if you don't make it through, because if you fail, as long as you give yourself a good after actions report, you're going to get a lot of lessons from that. Yeah. So, ultra running prepares me for what we do in business. It prepares me for what I go through in my marriage. It prepares me for everything else in life, because when life throws stuff at you, there's consequences if you fail. Yeah. Ultra running, there's no consequence if you fail.
Yeah, that's interesting. I see a lot of, and I know this is kind of overdone within the veteran podcast space, but there are a lot of similarities with jiu-jitsu that way, where, there's so much more to it than just folding laundry with somebody else in it, right? Is that there are a lot of life lessons with patience, with consequences, with being singularly focused, being mindful of what you do outside of it, what you eat, what you consume, not just food-wise, but, entertainment, who you hang out with. I mean, that there are so many facets of it that translate and correlate to everything else that you do in a similar way, which is interesting. But
in the teams, we said train like you fight, right? Yeah. So in life itself is the fight. Yeah. the hard thing that you choose to engage on your own time, that's the training.
Yeah.
You know?
What you mentioned business. So what do you do for employment or job wise, business wise?
So our company is called 307 Project. We're a podcast. We have a YouTube channel. And the main core of what we do is training. So we have developed some pretty cool missions where they're application only, so you can apply. And I go through all the applications and select individuals to form small teams. And we take these small teams of 8 individuals out into the wilderness, and we teach all the hard skills that it takes to be out in that environment. Land nav, filtration, water, shelter, all that stuff. We teach all that stuff right off the bat. And then we move through this wilderness environment over the course of 3 days. And the team has objectives, and they have to learn how to lead, how to communicate, how to be led, how to serve one another. It gets hard. And the great thing about that environment that we take people into is I don't have to manufacture the stress. The environment manufactures the stress, and I get to sit back, and me and my team, we get to critique individuals and critique the team on how to become more efficient. And it's been pretty amazing to, over the last 2 years, we've probably trained a couple hundred people. And when you watch a group of 8 strangers become a single organism within the span of 3 days, it's very, very rewarding, man.
Yeah.
Very rewarding.
Can you share what the algorithm or criteria is and how you select?
Yeah, usually for those specific courses, the basic course, there's another one called the Proving Ground that we run. Usually I'm looking for people who are in a position in life where they have influence over other people. So whether it's their fathers or mothers or their business owners, I want to spend time with people who are going to take what they learned and pass it on to the people they have influence over. You see a lot of people who want to come and train for, again, selfish reasons, so that they can say they did this cool thing and kind of just hang it on the wall and tell stories about it. Mm-hmm. That's not really the type of people that I want to spend time with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
is it, I mean, it's an application process. So is it something where, like from a financial standpoint, they pay to do that, or is it like a nonprofit kind of thing? Or
yeah, no, they pay to do that. Yeah. Most of the people that we work with are, successful people, yeah. Entrepreneurs, people that have been successful in life. Yeah. So yeah, they pay to do that.
Okay.
Yep.
And is there like a washout rate as far as like X number of people apply and you only take so many? Like, is it your chances of getting selected to be accepted to go through this program slim? It's
pretty slim. I mean, I would say, this year we're running about 10 courses. That's 8 people per course. So that's 80 people. We've probably gotten well over 500 applications.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So yeah, I really come through them, man. I mean, I take, obviously all of our time is valuable. Yeah. The customer, the team member, their time is valuable. My time is valuable. So we're really selective about who gets into these programs, and you want to spend time with the right people.
Yeah. So that's awesome. That's really neat. What gave you the idea for that, or where did that spark come from?
So when I was in Trade Ed, man, I realized how much of a passion I had for teaching. I probably learned more in a year at Trade Ed than I learned in my entire career as a shooter.
Yeah.
And I learned so much, but I also was taught how to teach. Mm-hmm. And I realized how powerful that tool was. And I became real passionate about it. So, I love teaching, and I just thought, how can I take the skills that I've learned, the skills that I've been given, how can I come up with this mission or this create this environment where I can pass it along to people that matter.
Yeah.
So that's how we came up with it. And dude, it's expanding. Like we have this year, we're running a more of an advanced mission for the people who have already graduated, kind of the entry level deal. We're doing a 140-mile long unsupported kayak down the largest undammed waterway on the East Coast, from the headwaters all the way to the coast.
That's awesome.
So that'll be 10 days, living out of a kayak, and it's just going to be awesome, dude.
Yeah. So are you in on, I mean, you'll be on that trip, I assume? Or?
Yeah. I go on all the trips.
Yeah. So all 10 courses, you're on all 10 of them.
Yeah. It keeps me busy.
Yeah. And what, it's you and several other people, or?
Yeah, it's me, my brother, and we have 2 full-time team members that help us at 3 of 7 Project. So we all instruct, and we actually now have it's cool. It's so awesome, man. It's such a blessing how it's grown. We actually have now students that have went through, all of our training courses, including like an advanced alpine mountaineering mission that we run, and now they come back as instructors.
Oh, that's cool.
And so we're now teaching them how to teach, and it's just compounding, man.
That's really cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's badass. Where does 3 of 7 come from?
3 of 7 is, the 3 comes from the concept of all humans being composed of a body, soul, and spirit. So physical body, our mind, will, and emotions, and then our spirit, which is our ability to connect or even just contemplate a creator, right? It's hard to put your finger on the spirit, although it's probably the most important aspect, I think, of us as humans.
Yeah.
And so that's where the 3 comes from. The number 7 is the biblical number for completion. And so we thought, our objective is to help people complete themselves. And how do we do that? We have to focus on all 3 of these aspects of the individual that we're training. And everything that we do, it incorporates all. It's going to be physically hard. It's going to be mentally tough. You're going to be challenged mentally, and we're going to engage you spiritually too.
Yeah.
And that's what it means.
Yeah. I love when there is a story behind a name that way. A lot of times it's like Ajax Plumbing. Well, there's 2, it starts with an A, so it's first in the fucking phone book. It's like, I like that there's a lot of thought put into the name. I will say that it gives me the idea, if it's 3 of 7, if I came out with like a wilderness survival school and I call it Not Quite 50% Project, can we do that? Is that a copyright infringement?
You go for it, brother.
I'm doing it.
I would love to know you were out there training people, Mike.
No, that's all you, my man. I appreciate it. Anything else that you want to discuss or bring up before we wrap up here?
No, man, that was a lot of stuff. I guess the last resource that we have, I know we talked a lot about running on this podcast. Me and my hand over there, we filmed a really awesome 10-part running series online. If any of you guys are interested in getting into running, learning how to run, learning what gear to buy, learning how to eat, and the very detailed stuff of how to get into the sport. That's online. We call it Enough Said Running.
Okay.
EnoughSaidRunning.com. That's a really cool resource we built out. But no, other than that, Mike, interesting conversation, man. Interesting conversation.
Yeah. Well, that's always the goal with every mic drop, is for people to be entertained and for it to be interesting. So I hope we accomplish that. But I can't thank you enough again for taking time out of your schedule to be here, because as you said, and I couldn't agree more, time is valuable, and I appreciate you sharing yours with me and with us today. So
it's an honor and a pleasure, Mike. I really love what you're doing, brother. Thank you. I'll be listening.
All right. I look forward to it. We will put all of his, where you can find him at, and contact and all that in the description show notes area. And just for the audio only viewers, if you can just mention where you can find you at, both website and any social media handles you want to mention.
It's just 3of7project.com. That's the number 3 of the number 7project.com. Everything's linked there.
Yeah. And Instagram, is that the social media profile that's easiest to?
Yeah. It'll all be linked right there on the website. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, for the listener, I hope you appreciate and enjoyed Chad's time here. I know I sure did. I can't thank you guys enough for continuing to tune in show after show to give me the honor to be able to sit at this desk and host amazing guests such as Chad. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you get to choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.